Okay, welcome to the podcast, Peter.
Thank you for having me, Thomas.
Really excited to get into this one. Peter is one of the industry's leading executives. Peter has over 40 years experience within the TIC industry, close to 40 years being spent at SGS, working in positions such as Executive Vice President of the EHS business, VP of Strategic Integration, SVP of Oil and Gas, a multitude of roles. Really excited to get into this one. So thank you again.
Thanks, Thomas.
Okay, so first question. Please, can you provide an overview of your career journey and how you got started in your field?
Sure, it's an interesting story, Thomas. I graduated with a Bachelor of Applied Science in Microbiology and Chemistry. And in the early 80s, it was extremely difficult to get a job in Australia. Unemployment was high, etc. So one day, applying for many jobs, came across a little, I think it was 3 lines, maximum 4 lines, which said, chemist wanted, apply to SGS, and it gave the address. And that was it. There was nothing else. Obviously, the manager was looking at his bottom line for advertising. So, I applied to the job, got an interview along with a lot of my colleagues that I went to school with. And the guy was explaining that, this is involved in the TIC industry. We go on board ships, you'll be sampling crude oil, and you'll be measuring the quantity and quality for our client, which was, ExxonMobil in those days. And he said, there's a lot of weekend work and a lot of night work and, in the rain and the sun, and you'll be expected to be on board these ships. And shit, I couldn't even swim. So I'm thinking, is this a job I'm really looking for? So I went home, and my mother asked me, and I still remember walking through the front door. She said, how'd the job go? And I said, this is a job I don't want. I don't want to be working. I thought I'd be working in the food or pharma industry, not necessarily out in the field. Sure enough, 2 days later, I got the job. And I said yes, because, situations were tough. And 2 days after that, I got a job offer also for food and pharma industry. So
Really?
I had committed to SGS. So, I went with them. And in all honesty, it's taken me all over the world. I've worked, Singapore, China, Philippines, Korea, time in Geneva, as you said in your introduction, in the oil and gas sector. Then I took over the environmental sector, which was somewhat of a small child at SGS, and grew that into a sizable business. And got the opportunity then to sit on the operations council at SGS, which effectively manages the company there, and retired after 39 plus years, and then was offered a directorship at ALS, which is a smaller player, but a significant player also in the TIC industry.
Wonderful. So just kind of smoothly moving on to the next question then. So can you just provide a general overview of the TIC industry history and how it's evolved over time? Albeit a complex question, I'd imagine.
It is also a fascinating subject, because the founder of SGS was effectively, and this is the story I was told, so it got embellished all through the SGS group. The founder was effectively working for a grain trader in the Baltics, and his uncle was a grain trader there as well. And there were reports of losses of cargo in Rouen in France. So the trade was between Russia, which of course is still, and the Baltics, a significant grain producer. And they were sending bags of grain down to Rouen to the West, which was evolving, Industrial Revolution, etc., in the 1870s. And they were getting reports of low bag weights. So, I heard that he was blamed for those low bag weights, obviously, being loaded on board ships, and he went down to Rouen to look. So it was a significant journey for him. And when he got there, he noticed that they were using hooks on the bags of grain, and as such, they were ripping the bags.
Yeah.
There was a lot of spillage, and up to 3 or 4% of cargo went missing because of the spillage on the docks, etc. So he wrote to his uncle and said, hey, I've discovered the reason why we're having these issues in Rouen. who were the government in Rwanda was complaining about the low or the losses during the voyage. And he said, I found the reasons. I can help stop these losses, which he effectively did with a few partners. His uncle got in touch with his mates who were also trading grain into the West, and SGS was born.
It's amazing.
Reducing losses. He then introduced things like FOG, which is full outturn guarantee on grains, etc., which of course excited everybody that they would have no losses. And then through acquisitions, and it's a similar story at Intratec, which has changed its name over the years. Same sort of story at Intratec. Growth through acquisitions, then entering the minerals field, entering the field of oil and gas, but focus significantly on commodity trading. And I remember one day at a shareholders meeting, a guy stood up and said, I own SGS shares and I've got no idea what your company does. So it was a tough question for Marchioni to answer then, but he said maybe you should read our annual reports, right? But yeah, I mean, and trying to explain it to the people who certainly in the commodities area, it's like if you had a football match and the football match was played without a referee, you can imagine the sort of mess that would occur, the infringements that would occur, offside would just be not detected, etc. And you'd have a complete mess. And it's similar with the commodity trading. The TIC industry plays the role of that referee. And that has then evolved into legislation, regulations that have been put in place by governments. And then, people are always trying to make a buck out of cheating, whether playing very close to the edge, introducing products into materials which then make them toxics, etc., just to make profits. And as such, you need some sort of oversight, and the TIC community provides that oversight. Also bringing efficiencies, etc., into play, but a lot of it has to do with making sure that either the transaction goes according to plan, or that commodities meet regulations and legislative requirements. So, and that has evolved into what they say is a $200 billion odd industry, which is significant.
I would imagine that in many cases, these private companies, or public now, but private companies in the past would have driven regulations to governments before governments would have implemented them themselves, right?
Yeah, it's true, but I mean, you always have dishonest people, right? which unfortunately, I mean, you look at the milk powder scare in China, where they used melamine into the powder to increase the nitrogen content. So, it gave a false protein content of the milk. And who does that? Who would do? And unfortunately, there's lots of cases, and some of them are unintentional. PFOS, PFOA, the use of chemicals in the past, which are now found out to be toxic. Non-stick pans in the past, weatherproof coats, Scotch guard that you put on couches. All those things were acceptable in the 70s. Now are not. Now have presented significant environmental concerns, and need to be tested for. And who better than a independent TIC provider to do that?
Absolutely. So just in regards to some of the sectors or industries, do you think there are particular sectors or industries that are driving the demand for TIC services, and why?
Yeah, I think you just need to look at society, which drives interest. Certainly the area of digital. And there's two areas here where the TIC industry wants to play and does effectively play, right? Certainly on digital, the interconnection of things, the Internet of Things, is extremely important. All goods or all services are now related somehow to the Internet, somehow to some sort of transmission of data, etc. And if you take, let's use a car as an example now. Self-driving cars, etc. Can you
Hmm.
imagine if all the electronics inside a car didn't talk to each other, or
Hmm.
didn't in the future talk to the car next to it to ensure a safe journey? All
Hmm.
those protocols, all those electronics, the reliability of all the features need to be tested somewhere. Now, either
Hmm.
you do it in-house, do it yourself by setting up very complex, very fast-changing laboratory environments, or you outsource that work to a TIC player and have him do that type of analysis, or use a mixture of both.
Hmm.
Mobile telephones, as an example. I mean, probably half of the testing is done in-house, whereas the other half of the testing is done external. Every time a new mobile telephone comes on the market, it's tested. All the protocols within it, from G1 now to G5 to G6, all those are separate tests, and all
Hmm.
those will be needed to be tested to make sure that your telephone doesn't interfere with your coffee machine that you turn on in the morning, or it doesn't interfere with your refrigerator. So all those protocols have to be tested. So you can see it's an immense market. So digital is certainly an area which is a focus of the TIC industry. Other areas, food, are very important. Legislation around food, nutritional value of food, making sure that the standards are kept high. Pharma, we're an aging population. You look at Italy, you look at Japan, etc.
Hmm.
It's an aging population which needs to be looked after, so more pharmaceuticals, etc. The viruses, look at what COVID did, look how much money Eurofins made during the COVID period. Those sort of aspects around society to ensure that they stay healthy, drug development, etc. And not, yes, there are the major drug companies who have their own laboratories, but there's also the smaller biotech companies which don't, and will use an
Hmm.
outside player to do their testing. And if me as a TIC company has 5 customers, confidentiality is ensured. I have the 10-20 million dollar laboratory to do this work. Why would they need to set that up to do their own? They can use a TIC plate. So the area of pharmaceuticals, etc. Environment, of course,
Hmm.
is a big
Yeah.
push.
Hmm.
Sustainability, a
Hmm.
big push. Issues with regards to greenwashing, with regards to am I really a sustainable company or not? What do I need to do? TIC companies are providing assistance there. So that's a big growth area. Now if you want to get cash to do a startup, likely they'll ask you, what's your ESG like?
Hmm.
What's your ESG rating like? You're going to have to prove that it's a good level, which the TIC companies can do for you. And then finally, the energy transition, electrifying the world
Yeah.
it's a big area as well where the TIC
Hmm.
players are playing. Whether it's installing a wind farm and inspecting that, or it's doing the assessment of the transmission wires, or solar panels, or all sorts, LEDs, etc. It's all there. Energy metals, copper, nickel, cobalt, lithium, etc. All testing in those areas too. So, the TIC industry's got such a wide scope. It's just incredible the areas that they can service.
Absolutely. You've touched on it just briefly there, but in particular, what role does sustainability and environmental considerations play within the TIC industry, and how are
Yeah.
companies incorporating these into their operations?
Well, I suppose the best example is you look at Shell and the likes of Shell, BP, etc., who 5 years ago would have been viewed as significant polluters of the world, stop oil, etc. Even
Mm.
they are now on the bandwagon of sustainability and
Hmm.
the environmental issues. And looking to ways to become net zero,
Mm.
carbon zero. And this is where the TIC industry really adds, in my view. And because I was heavily involved in that sector, the environmental side, the sustainability side, this is where TIC really can become involved in that particular area. of proving the sustainability of testing goods. When I was in Korea, our biggest business was roche testing, and that was to test electronic components to make sure that they didn't have toxic chemicals in it. And that wasn't for me using it at home. I would never touch that component. I would never see that component. But it was really to see what happened once you destroyed that. Once it went into that stream of waste, to ensure that the waste that's generated by these electronic components and plastics and all sorts of things that we tested, to make sure that it could be recycled, and then if it couldn't be recycled, that it could be disposed of in a sustainable way, if there is such a way. So it's as I said, more and more important now. And what's interesting is that if I, as a company, want to project myself as being sustainable, all my suppliers must be sustainable as well, must have a good ESG rating. So it flows all the way down that logistics chain, which then needs to be proved, and it's going to be a massive market in the future for the TIC industry, and I think for society in general. We want things to be environmentally friendly. We want things to be sustainable. I believe, and that's why it's such an important area, and it's good to see that the TIC industry can play in that area to help as well. And they need to be sustainable too. I mean, both SGS and ALS, who I've worked for, are trying as fast as possible to reach net zero through our company as well.
Yeah, wonderfully said. Thank you. Technology, what role is this playing in optimizing operational processes, and how do you leverage it within your role and roles in the past?
In when I probably started certainly in university, we used to cut out our GC graphs and weigh them on a weighing scale to see how many components were in. So you can imagine the massive errors in that particular area. It was percent, not. And now we're talking about parts per trillion that we are detecting and able to detect. So I give an example of a parts per billion. Now it's parts per trillion, right? If you're looking for one person in China, that's what you're looking for in some of these things, even more now, right? It's just technology has moved into such a level where you're able to go to such low detection levels, because they've found out that forever chemicals like dioxins, etc., are toxic at these levels, and they gradually build up in your body. So you may absorb, 1 part per trillion every day, but it adds up. It doesn't go away from your body, and eventually, it's where cancers forms, it's where tumors forms, etc. So you need to be looking at these very low detection levels. So that has spurned legislation to be able to go lower and lower and lower. And once you go lower and lower and lower, there's more testing involved. So that's important. But where does it help a laboratory? And as I said, the TIC industry has moved more and more probably away from the commodity typical TIC services into providing laboratory services for its customer base. And certainly the likes of Eurofins has built their whole life on that, looking at that particular sector. And there it's important because, if your labor cost is above 50%, it becomes very difficult to make profit in a laboratory. So you're trying your best to reduce that. And the only way you can do that is through the use of robotics in your lab, or to use instruments which can really service a multitude of samples, thousands of samples per day, instead of, in my early days of my career, maybe you could run 20 samples, right? It took an hour to get through the GC for one run. Now it takes seconds for some of these to be performed. So the aim is really to reduce labor costs within your laboratory, have your chemists, have your technicians look at the higher end side of things, releasing of the results, getting more customers, etc. And really use automated tools inside the labs to reduce that labor cost, improve efficiency, and give you the ability to run more and more samples, and then set up, and you'll hear that often in the TIC industry, set up these hub and spoke models where you have a
Yeah.
large hub laboratory, you have your spokes feeding into that laboratory, which instead of running 100 samples a day is running 1,000 samples a day.
Yeah.
I think AI will play a big part
Mm.
because a lot of what's behind the test is still human data,
Yeah.
you know, human data, not collection, but revision, etc., on a daily
Yeah.
basis.
Yeah.
And you start bringing AI in to do that, machine learning to do that. It'll play a big part there too, where you
Yeah.
won't need that chemist to spend 2 or 3 hours in the morning to look at the results, to look at the data. A machine will do that, and he'll be able to use his time more productively.
I think that's important though, because I think some of these spots in the labour market are so tight for the available talent. It's a massive inhibitor on growing the business. So if there's
Very,
any way of basically using AI to,
yeah,
I don't know, look at a graph to someone that wouldn't be able to do that through
sure.
experience, I mean, that just opens up massively the possibilities to grow. That's what we see, obviously, from our perspective.
Exactly. That's exactly what will happen and should happen, because as you said, in my day, to become an inspector, you need to be either a chemist
Yeah.
or you need to come from a ship, first mate,
Mm.
officer, captain in some cases.
Yeah.
Nowadays, you're looking at not university graduates, maybe in some countries, but you're looking at high school graduates, and then having to
Mm.
put them through a significant training program to be
Mm.
able to do that, and using technology to train these people, then technology to help them through their jobs as well is important.
Yeah,
So yeah,
definitely.
it's changing.
Next question. I really like this one. I'm very interested. So, what are clients looking for? What brings in repeat business? How do you maintain and develop strong relationships with key customers or clients?
Yeah, interesting. Lots of people ask me this question, and I
Right.
think everybody is sort of expecting me to say quality. Quality is
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
important in this business.
Yeah.
If I tell you that quality is taken for granted, I think
Mm.
if you employ one of the large TIC players, a good name with a good knowledge, with a good quality system, with accreditation for its tests, etc., even for its sampling teams or inspectors, all going through a very rigorous testing protocol. Quality is a given, and the unfortunate thing then comes price.
Mm. Mm.
Price, unfortunately, still plays a very important part. And sometimes I wonder why, when a commodity is worth millions, why suddenly somebody's haggling over, $10 on a test.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, it does confuse me sometimes. And it's not that the TIC industry becomes a big, expensive supplier in the transaction. Usually it's very minor, certainly less than 1% in any transaction is the inspection cost. So
Mm-hmm.
it does concern me a bit, and the race to the bottom through
Mm.
competition has played its part over the
Mm-hmm.
last sort of 40 years that I've been involved, which is unfortunate.
Mm-hmm.
So price does play a big part, but the thing that I've seen up and coming over the 40 years is time,
Mm.
information, and time. The speed of getting that information to the customer, because we all know the saying, "Time is money," right? So whether it's a ship that's waiting to get bills of ladings on board, or it's a consultant waiting to dispose of 3,000 tons of soil because it's contaminated or treated, or whether it's somebody that's waiting to release a product into the market and is waiting for the protocols to be tested. Time is
Mm.
money, and customers are more and more expecting a speedy result rather than a
Mm.
and there they may be willing to pay a little bit more to get that result faster. And now with technology, if we sent our report 1 week after the ship had loaded to our customer, when I started 40 years ago, they were happy. Now, if you delay it by 30 seconds, somebody's on the phone to you saying, "Where's my information?" So the world is changed a bit, and we all see that in the lives we lead, right? With getting fast. You look at TikTok, etc., right? Very fast entertainment, etc., and it's the same with the client base. So I'd say, price, time, quality is a given.
Good. Okay. Awesome. No, that's insightful. Thank you. On your side, so can you discuss any mentors or role models who've influenced your career choices and provided guidance?
Yeah. Listen, I'm a strong believer of finding a mentor within a large corporation. SGS, as an example, has 90,000 plus people working. And if you try to navigate your way through a company like that, I think it's extremely difficult. So I think you really need to find yourself a good mentor who you respect, who has been successful, and done that. And I had that in my mentor at OGC when I started. He was based in Geneva. He took a liking to my style, and took me then effectively from Australia to Singapore and around the world. So yeah, he was very important to me. And my second mentor was, when I was based in Asia, based in China, who took me under his wing and put me as managing director of Korea, which, I had an oil and gas background. I knew very little about the rest of the SGS group. But he saw how I'd built oil and gas in China and said, you can work in an Asian environment and we need somebody in Korea. And what he taught me was take risks. Don't sit there managing your bottom line so that you get a big bonus. You'll go nowhere. Going back to my first mentor, the best advice he ever gave me is you cannot shrink your way to greatness.
Yeah.
Because often, you have a business that's in trouble and you want to cut costs, you cut. And before you know it, a business which was $1 billion is, 100 million. Yes, 100 million at 20%, but you had $1 billion at 15, right? So, so don't shrink your way to greatness. My second mentor, his thing was take risks. If you see an opportunity, go for it. I'll support you, and he did, and he let me invest in Korea in our mobile testing facility, which was the first of its kind in Korea, outside of the sort of Samsungs and LGs, etc. And we set that up, with his backing. Did a few things with the expenses, etc. that Geneva didn't need to know. But we bought wisely, we invested wisely, we invested over the levels that Geneva would have let us invest. But you need to take a risk, right? You take that risk, and now it's probably one of the best businesses in Korea. So
Amazing.
Take that risk. And sometimes, one of the head CFOs told me years back, Geneva does not need to know everything. So,
coming from a CFO, that's it's good advice.
Yes. Good advice. I mean, of course, you need to be transparent, right? You can't you can't be dishonest or anything like that. But the thing is, be willing to take a risk, and there are people there to support you. And
I think that's fantastic. I think I think it's fantastic. I think again, you see some companies get to a certain size, and they, you look at businesses like Amazon. There's different types of companies. There's like customer centric businesses, and Amazon's obviously a process business. And because they've squeezed the company to be so data driven, intricate on that side, that they really lack big thinkers entrepreneurs and risk takers, so they're constantly trying to headhunt these people in. I find it fascinating. You know, when you do hear of proper I mean, these MDs in these businesses, they're entrepreneurs essentially. I mean, you know, they're working within a business, but they are proper entrepreneurs. When you hear about their pathways up and what they've done with businesses, it's phenomenal. So I just see it as inspiring.
Yeah, and I think if you stifle that, this is when a company starts getting trouble.
100%.
I think there has to be a massive balance between operations and support. You know, support being tax and finance, and which is not my area, etc. But the operations guys are the ones that are bringing in the money. So be aware of who brings in the cash. You know, it's important.
Nice. Full stop.
Yeah.
So this is really interesting. How do you define success, and how has your perspective on success evolved throughout your personal professional journey?
Yeah, it's a good question. You know, success. Again, like quality, the financial success is somewhat of a given, right? If you don't have financial success, unfortunately, your career will be short-lived. And it's great to be the best people's person, etc. But again, if you don't have that financial success from your operation, you know, your career will be short-lived. So that's a given. But how do you generate financial success? Well, you have a very good team behind you. And I've always in my career had the opportunity to build a great team behind me. You know, and I think what generates, in my view, the most success is if I leave that team, which I've done on many occasions, and there's been someone in that team to take my place who has the same values as I did, and then is able to then build up that team, as happened to me in Korea, where, you know, I took it from 30 million to 70 million, and the next guy took it to 150 million. You know, if you can build that and get that team working, instill in them the necessity to be financially successful as well. But have that character where you're looking after your people. And I think Branson said it well, right? You don't need to look after the customers, you need to look after your staff. They'll look after the customers if they're looked after. And I think that will happen in any industry. So look after your people, treat them well, treat them with respect, and you know, and rest assured you'll have a good, viable business, because you will have that person who brings something new, you know, and nurture that. Then that risk you need to take to bring that new project to life. And I think that's it. So team building and having a successor in place, I've always viewed as being, you know, a successful trait. And if you have that, then your financial success will probably follow.
That's quite closely tied into the culture, right, of whatever you're building. And culture, it's not just words you put on a screen, and that can define what it is, but really it's about the standards that you set and sort of that regurgitation of it. You know, the Airbnb founders said on a podcast recently, you know, one of their cultural values was excellence towards customers. And you know, his staff used to bring him things. He said it's not good enough, you know, and they would go away and eventually they would come and say it's fantastic. And then it got to a point where he could actually leave the room, and they would check each other and say, you know, that's not good enough. That's not how we do it. And it, you know, it starts to snowball. And you talked about succession and stuff like that. It's almost part of culture, isn't it? The culture of what you built.
It is indeed. Yeah. You're absolutely.
So, final question. If you could look back in time and give advice to your 21-year-old self, what would that be?
Yeah. Don't take the job at SGS. No. That's not true. I've had a fantastic career, etc. Listen, I think there were certain times in my life when I should have said no. And I suppose it's an interesting thing to say, right? But you know, sometimes opportunities presented themselves where I was pushed into taking that opportunity, at probably the detriment of my my family and in some cases my health, etc. So and I should have really said no, but I didn't have the guts to say no, and I went along with it. And yeah, okay, it did become successful, etc. But life could have been we talk about work-life balance, which I think is a lot more important now than when I was starting a career. It would have given me a better work-life balance. And there's certainly two situations that I reflect on where I should have said, no, I'm not ready for this step. I shouldn't take this step because it will be detrimental to my family. So, but I did say yes, and it did take me on a good path. Now, if I had said no, would I have reached the same levels within the group as I did? Probably. I would have taken maybe a different route, but I would have confidence in myself that I would have still been able to achieve a higher level. But certainly, if I would have said no, I think things which occurred on the family side would have been better. So I think you need to take more than just your career into consideration. And you also need to take into considerations of those around you and those who are supporting you. And sometimes you do need to make that tough decision of saying, no, I'm not ready for that. I'll wait for the next opportunity and go down that path and settle the family situations first and look after them. So that's probably my best advice I could give to myself. That on those two occasions I sort of said no.
But a lot's gone right as well. So yeah,
a lot did go right. And maybe I was lucky, right? So yeah, no, but a lot did go right, and rest assured that the family's in a good place too.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Peter. It's been a fantastic conversation.
Pleasure, Thomas. It's been
very good.
Very good. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.